Namaskar. Episode 160 of Daily Global Insights with Sri and Sri, May 11th, 2021. US News. According to NBC Poll, two-thirds of Americans say social platforms do more to divide us than unite us. Well, this is something that we have been experiencing, haven't we, Sridharji?
Is the first formal poll that just ratifies and confirms the truth and the reality. Not that it will make material difference, but it's just reaffirmation. If it was a Fox or let us say Breitbart or Epoch, they'll say it's a right wing. Given the poll is by NBC, gives more legitimacy, credibility, which brings the progressives and left into the equation.
And Georgia governor bans defunding of police. That's a good move, in my opinion. A country cannot run without its police. So, what are your thoughts, sir?
Well, I think that he's seeing rising crimes all around the country. He's seeing this defunding police is a strategy to legitimize the crimes. We don't want to report, but the number of crimes in Manhattan, in Minneapolis and Los Angeles, and many of these urban Washington D.C. Many of the cities, you can see the rising homicides. To some extent, we have given the anecdotal numbers. It's a very good move by Georgia Governor Brian Kemp to preempt this decision.
And Portland police have responded to at least 359 shootings this year. It just complements what you just said, sir.
Well, that is a defunding police movement, and they wouldn't even want to have National Guard or anybody. They would like these crimes and violence to continue, and Seattle is another place where there seems to have been, to some extent, tapering down around that West Coast. But, despite this 359 shootings, there is no attempt to reinforce and address the issue of crime.
And Biden is now meeting with GOP leaders for deal making. Wow. This could have been done before.
Well, he could have, and he recognizes that he's got two problems. One problem he has is on the funding side, which is namely the taxes. There's a lot of pushbacks. Second, on the size of the stimulus, this is just coming on the back of the $2.1 million stimulus that was released, and he still has got part of the $1.8 trillion, which is around the America Child Plan. So he's not able to get this infrastructure agenda moving. And then he's got three challenges that he's facing. I think first we have already touched on the tax side. The second is the job reports has dampened his spirit, so he feels that he needs to go back to the table. But again, the flip-flop. Yesterday morning, he says, as jobs falter, Biden tells people, you either accept jobs or you lose unemployment. Then by afternoon, he was saying, he followed up with the morning comments by saying, hey, employers, if you pay decent wages, workers will come back. So almost beyond unionization, he's implicitly making a plea on wage negotiations.
And Mitch McConnell of GOP says that GOP will support infrastructure bill with a cap at $800 billion. So this number, the GOP has been pretty consistent. They've been saying, I think what they did, and correct me if I'm wrong, sir, they took the 2.8 trillion in infrastructure bill. They looked at what was the real infrastructure. The rest perhaps was what you call as porks and earmarks and so on and so forth, and said, okay, this part we will get behind, the rest has to go. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Your assessment is absolutely correct. One of the other things that they've done is, if you recall, they would not want to support more than 600 to 640, of which 600 was accounted for, 40 was the cap, just in case they spill. Now, they've increased this cap from 600 to another $200 billion cushion in case the programs have overrun. So I believe that $800 billion is a good compromise to the $2.1 trillion that the Democrats suggested. I think it also would legitimize the genuine plan, which is the America Child Plan, which is the child credits as well as the child care, and plus providing the expansion of benefits to the child care workers.
And Senate Democrats press ahead with elections reform bill. So this is a reform bill that affects which part of America again?
It's federalizing the conduct of the elections.
Okay, so that's something that I would like to get behind. I would like to have a uniform election process across the country, especially for the election of the president, sir?
Election of the president, and not only the election of the president, but the election of the state legislatures and councils. What it does, there's pros and cons to this bill. The Republicans, stoutly oppose it. There's 23 states which are tagging behind this. I don't believe that the Republicans believe that the Constitution is fair and just in terms of the mandate given to the states from conducting the process and the elections itself. Where the problem has come up is around the discrepancies that have been introduced. That's one part of it. The second part of it is whether the executive and the judicial branch usurp the powers which is entrusted with the legislature on the conduct of the elections. This is where the states are going to push back. By federalizing it, then you are beginning to control what happens within the states, which is not as per the Constitution.
And in India news, Indian government tells the Supreme Court that the vaccination strategy is equitable. Intervention will have consequences. If I'm understanding this correctly, the Supreme Court has been told by the government that its edict is difficult to carry out.
Yes, what he's saying is that the allocation of the vaccines is fair and just as per the consistency has been followed in terms of the number of vaccines allocated to each of the states. So if you try to now come in and intervene and come up with a new framework, it only is going to upset the process, and it just is going to make it very difficult for a democratically elected government to run a process, because the Supreme Court comes and says, this is not good, so you change the rule. We have already seen the inconsistency, and I wrote about this, which is to say, hey, you are saying that you need to install real-time software to monitor the oxygen cylinders. Then you are saying you've got to be able to track the distribution of these oxygen cylinders, and you've got to be in a position to give. Oh, by the way, you give more cylinders to Delhi because we all happen to live. I'm saying this. We all happen to live in Delhi. Now, when you begin to juxtapose these kinds of mechanisms, then you can hold the government for the conduct and whether everybody is being treated in the respective states for the policy of the government, rather than saying, no, your policies don't work. I, as the Supreme Court, enact those policies. And similarly, appointing this 12-member task force as part of all this COVID strategy, again, is an intervention by the Supreme Court. So I think this is what the center is saying, or the state or the government is saying. Our strategies are fair and equitable. Okay, we are not going to change that. And if you change it, then you're going to collapse the whole process.
And in other news, US support for COVID to India reaches close to $500 million. While they showed some hesitation, now US has jumped in with both feet, sir.
It is. I think it also, the contributions also includes a lot of Indian American efforts through organizations such as, various US-India Business Council, SEVA, and so on and so forth. There's a number of organizations which have got behind in support of sending these oxygen cylinders and other kinds of support. I believe that this will go to more than $1 billion by the time this whole thing is wrapped up.
And exports and better balance sheet to help firms to tide over second wave. This is for India. We have told you yesterday that the numbers look very good for the month of May. So this just adds more credence to what we observed yesterday.
Well, I think it does add more credence. One of the questions that is concerning to everybody is, what's going to happen to the economic growth, which was projected to be 10 to 12.5% growth. If there are shutdowns and so on, and the domestic consumption is impacted, how is the economy going to be made up? Plus, also what it does to the balance sheets of some of the companies. Export numbers point that there is still continued momentum, and that is to some extent will help these institutions to tide over. There's still questions around MSME, but we'll look at that in more detail.
Hamas fires, this is global news now. Hamas fires rockets deep into Israel, escalating tensions. Israel still does not have a government in place. This is still a caretaker government. And now with all these rockets being fired, I think things are beginning to escalate to a climax, sir.
Well, I think that whenever there is an uncertainty in the formation of the government, then you have opportunity for unrest to settle. You do not need an excuse for unrest to settle. There's also rumors that it is very much conceivable that Mr. Naftali Bennett, who is extreme right, is likely to become the prime minister, who is a pro-settlement person. Under these circumstances, I think you're beginning to see some first salvos being fired.
And clashes in the Jerusalem holy city of Al Aqsa Mosque injured, I think, about 50 Palestinians. Is my reading correct?
It's about 300 Palestinians, probably
Okay.
50, a little more seriously hurt. And that's another, this is the month of Ramadan, which is drawing to your close. So there's going to be a lot of people in and out of the mosques. And so I think that the spurt in violence may be in concert with this. With these rocket escalations, plus Israeli police moving in to contain. I think Israel also responded to these tensions with the appropriate attacks in those territories. So you're beginning to see the simmering of it coming out.
And China denounces US appeal for Taiwan to join WHO meeting. Again, I think United States and perhaps some other Western countries are trying to normalize the existence of Taiwan, and I think China will not have that.
Well, I think Taiwan has been one of the most active and supportive players of the world cause, not just on the manufacturing side, but also on the support and the aid being given. For example, India received, I don't remember the exact number, 100 metric tons of oxygen and oxygen cylinders, and Taiwan stood up and said it is in support, but it's also supporting some of the Asian countries. We must also state that Taiwan and Israel are the two countries which are the leaders in the pack in terms of managing and containing this COVID virus. So, I think China has definitely got its nose out of joint.
And EU talks up Afghan support as US leaves and security declines. We saw the bombing that happened near a school yesterday in Kabul. So this is now again beginning to. This is like a cycle. Like I've heard this thing 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Feels like a deja vu, sir.
I think it's very interesting that even the Pakistan, I don't know whether it is a red herring, but Pakistani Prime Minister says if there is no security in Afghanistan, in other words, they could be anchoring to say we'll take over Afghanistan and merge with our country. They're saying that Belt and Road Initiative will now be at major risk and be threatened if there is uncertainty. I don't believe the world community is going to accept, not the Afghanis are going to accept, some third country coming in. So EU, which has been historically been long in dealing with these types of humanitarian as well as security crisis, is really stepping up and saying we could have a major problem in the region if this is not addressed. I mean, US has spent enough money, and they've realized after spending so much of time, there's no solution.
Nepal Prime Minister loses confidence vote amid surging viruses. And again, so there is uncertainty here too.
Yes, I think when we use the word viruses, there apparently is now this Indian variant is also going into Nepal, right? So it's going into the adjacent territory, besides the generic version of that SARS, ARCON, whatever, CoV2 virus. There's also this mutational virus now going in. So they have this spurt, but that has nothing to do with, there's an uncertainty that they need to address. In the meanwhile, there is political bickering between the factions within the Communist Party, and Mr. Oli is going to has stepped down. And what happens next is an advantage India, advantage China. When you look at it, it looks like advantage India to some extent, because Oli was one of the most, renegade guys who was casting some serious aspersions.
WHO classifies triple mutant variant from India as a global risk. This has become like a handmaiden of China, isn't it?
It is. I think it's almost like a Chinese propaganda which is coming out. Indian media hasn't picked up as it. I'm sure you will begin to see it, but certainly in the US media, CNBC is reporting, and not all of the media has picked up. So my view is it's no longer COVID, which is China virus. It's like, Indian variant, Brazil variant, UK variant, South African variant. You have, this variant, that variant. But they've forgotten this whole thing started. Notwithstanding the fact some people said, hey, this news is coming out of Breitbart or somebody, China had made an explicit pledge that India must be isolated because the reason is it is posing risk. Well, China should be isolated and should be debarred for a number of things, not India. So India needs more support. And how did we address this issue when we had virus in the United States? Each of the countries went into lockdown and managed using air bubbles. So this is a very political rhetoric. And for WHO to come out and talk about a triple mutant variant when there's at least so many vaccines are coming out, and that too, it says that if you read the report, an official from WHO, who the hell this official is, and what is the data behind it, is all, we'll come to know. I'm not suggesting it's questionable, we'll come to know.
And in markets news, Ethereum surges past 4,000, and the Dow and other stocks seem to have had a good day today. Treasury gives flexibility to states on COVID funds. What does that mean, sir? A little bit expansion, please.
Yes, first and foremost, Ethereum goes past 4,000, just less than 4,000. If you were in our special show, we said that Ethereum will surely kind of make up. Markets were down today. They went up 225 points and then got back yesterday, got down on the back of the unemployment numbers, and potential inflation. And also because of that, the tech stocks dragged and the market came down. Now, coming to the most important statement, that is the Treasury. There's a $350 billion allocated towards the local and state administration in that, if you saw in that December budget, which got approved, the 1.9 or 2.1 trillion dollars. Quite amazing for the Treasury to state, hey, you can now use these funds as per your discretion as appropriate. We will not be questioning. In other words, the funds allocated for managing COVID, you have now the discretion to spend it, and the Treasury will not. What they're implying is many of the blue states are defunct and they are badly managed, and some of them are even close to bankrupts. So they're saying that these funds, you can use it to fill up the gaps and the balance sheets, and we will not be asking you the questions. This was the whole contention and dispute behind that December funding plan that was stuck between Senate and the House. That's what that means. That statement means, sir.
And with that, we bring to an end today's Daily Global Insights. We'll be back again tomorrow, bright and early. Namaskar, and thanks for watching.
Namaskar, and thank you so much, and have a wonderful day, and we'll be meeting soon.
So, viewers, in about 2.5 hours, TV Mohandas Pai and Sridhar Chityalaji will be taking a look at the second wave COVID, the economic situation in India vis-a-vis the United States. Just a fireside chat series. We have got the next episode for you. Don't miss that one. It is going to be a cracker session. Thank you so much, sir. Namaskar.
Namaskar.